Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Surf and Sales Podcast. It is April 25th. We know people are scrambling to close out their quarter. For those of you on the SaaS quarter, as it's called, we know this is your last week. We wish you the best. We hope that you hit all your numbers and that your numbers were not created by dogs sitting around a poker table using a Ouija board or playing poker. So who knows?
Or Chat GPT.
Or chat with chat GPT. So want to give a very nice and thank you to HubSpot for putting us on the HubSpot podcast network. There are tons of great episodes out there, not just from us, but I think John Barrows just joined, so he's there. But another good friend who's going to come on ours soon is Jason Bay, and his podcast is called Outbound Squad. If you haven't listened to him, or you don't know him, we encourage you, I'll speak for Scott as I always do, and say that you should check him out, and not just his podcast. Like, he has great content. He really does support the sales community. He wants to help people get better. And he'll talk about everything from call reluctance to multi-threading, complex deals, like all this stuff that is super important to all of us. So please check out the Outbound Squad with our good friend Jason Bay over on the HubSpot podcast network. Without any further ado, Mr. Leese, you're running the show today. What are we doing?
Yeah, I'm just going to sit here and ask you a bunch of questions, kind of hot topics, if
All right.
you will. Kind of like Pardon the Interruption,
Okay.
or First Take, or one of those kind of shows. So
Okay.
let's
Can I call you out?
do it. Yeah, I mean, I fully expect us to be yelling at each other at some point in time.
Okay.
During the show.
Let's even preface this by saying that yesterday my 13-year-old son asked who cursed more using the F word on the podcast, Scott or Richard, and we agreed that it thinks it's fairly even. And then I said, Scott, well, what about in real life? And Scott absolutely claimed victory that he probably uses it more than me.
In real life, yeah. We should, somebody who's listening to this episode should keep a tally of who curses more, and then message Richard and I, and
Yes.
we'll Venmo you like $100 if you get it right. Like, whoever the first person is to get the right, numbers and claim victory. Even better, you could post about it.
Yes, you could post about it. In fact, I will do this. Let's make it $100 for someone who writes a post about the podcast and says, I'm posting this because if I do, you got to tell us why you like the podcast. But then whoever wins the fucking curse word challenge,
but it's like golf, right? Like, so actually whoever has the lowest score wins, right? Yeah. Just to clarify. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to start off with something that you are known for disliking, and that is buzzwords. So yes. I want you to give me your most annoying buzzword of the moment and tell me why.
Well, it's of all time is effectiveness and efficiency. Those are my two biggest.
Those are your two all-time ones, but are those still the two like most annoying ones of the moment right now?
No, I would say it's a good question. I would say, can we say chat GPT is a buzzword?
I think you can say whatever you want as a buzzword.
I would say chat GPT is becoming a buzzword, and that's what I hate the most, because people don't even understand it. Particularly, and I don't know the reason why for this one, but and they're not a sponsor, neither of these people are, but chat GPT, as I understand it, is limited to data based from 2021 or earlier, which I don't like. But I still use it, like it's a good stepping off, but Bard doesn't. So that's one of the reasons. So I don't know why everybody's using chat GPT to integrate. I don't know if it's a better API or just people don't know about the others or stuff like that. So, but yeah, chat GPT is probably my most hated these days.
Maybe first mover advantage, or, branding, marketing, whatever. I don't even know how many people know about Bard by comparison to chat GPT. It's become a verb now,
Yes, it has.
Like, Google that.
Yes.
Chat GPT that thing.
Yes.
Right. I think that's a good indication that something has crossed over into buzzword land.
Yes. So here's my question. why do I hate buzzwords. Do you not hate them, or is it just like, well, that's just Richard's rant, so I let him do that?
No, I don't like buzzwords either, but on a scale of 1 to 10 of annoyance, buzzwords get you to like a 9 or a 10, and they get me to like a 2 or a 3.
This is true.
So, yeah, well, that's the only difference. So we're talking about GPT and a little bit about AI. I saw this great tweet from Chelsea over at Lavender, and it keeps playing around in my head. And in essence, it was, how long until, quote, powered by AI, end quote, becomes a negative and it's no longer like a positive? Think about that for a second. Will that happen? And if so, how long is that going to take?
Well, while I'm thinking about it, I'm just going to say, fuck shit, motherfucker, because we need to have this contest.
I don't know if those fucking count, dude.
I think I think it already is a negative in many.
You think it is a negative right now? You think people are like, oh, okay, you didn't. That's not. Richard didn't make that. The fucking
right.
AI thing.
No, the way I interpreted how she said it, and I like Chelsea. You said that's who it is.
Yeah, over at Lavender. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it makes people roll their eyes because it can immediately feel disingenuous, right? For those of us in the sales world where we know how it can help us, we may not see it as the negative, but I think to everybody else, it could be. I also think I don't know, for those of us who are outside of our sphere, right? Like, because we pay attention to this technology, right? Like, I don't know what middle America thinks about it. Is it scary? I mean, I already know it's scary to people, but I don't know what, like, sort of the and I don't mean this in a negative way, the average person who doesn't have a sales or a tech job or a tech career. I mean, there's far more of people who are not in our world than are. And so I don't know how it's interpreted there yet. Like, is it, oh, that's cool, or, oh, that's interesting, but I don't understand how it's ever going to apply to me? Or is it, no, that's really scary Terminator Matrix stuff, right? So I don't know. But I think it's already hitting that spot. In fact, in some ways it is, because it's become a buzzword. I'm like hearing everybody talk about how they've integrated ChatGPT, and I'm like, to do what? Because I don't care that you did. I want to know what pain you're solving. And then later, if you want to tell me it's ChatGPT, tell me, right? It's kind of like the sales deck. Like, I don't need to see your logo salad on the second slide. I don't need to see your VCs on the third slide. Put that shit at the end. Right? Nobody cares.
So if it starts to become like a eye roll, which I think is a really great description of it, does that start to impact like your desire or willingness to work with or advise certain companies where you're like, no thanks, it's not interesting to me anymore, if it ever was?
No. On the contrary, when I see people talk about it, I still want to talk to them. But again, we're hit with it every day. So that, it's coming from sort of my commonality of seeing it constantly.
Yeah, in our bubble or whatever.
But when someone does come to me and say, hey, Richard, I'd love your opinion. We're doing this with AI. Well, I actually need to double down on that. Like, I really want to know what's going on and see how people are using it, to understand that piece. Like, we'll talk about it in a minute, but, HubSpot has some new AI and ChatGPT stuff, which I think is really cool. And I also think, God, this is going to sound egotistical. So, Scott,
I think they're used to that from you by now, Richard. The audience is aware.
Yeah. Is that, I'm really trying to understand it. And when I see, I know that everything in technology goes in phases, right? Like, even when HubSpot started, it started at, step one and it was good. Then they add step two and it's great. And then they add step three and it gets better and better. So that's where I think we are with AI. Like, I think the idea, again, in our world of sales for the last, since the beginning, it's really been since November, it's been about prospecting, but I'm so far beyond that. I don't care about prospecting anymore in AI. Like, that to me is table stakes. What I want to know is, where in the AI how do I use it to teach me to code, to have a conversation with the procurement team, right? How do I go and have it listen to my call and then tell me the right way to say it back next time? Like that. So I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead, and there's probably someone above me going, Richard, you're still way back, you're old school. Like, we're way beyond that too. So that's the piece that
Yeah.
intrigues me. So it does not scare me, it intrigues me.
So there's this piece about advising companies and kind of picking and choosing who you work with a little bit. There's more and more people now who are getting the role of advisor, ambassador,
Yep.
whatever you want to call these roles. I'm getting hit with questions all the time about how do you structure engagements? Should I be getting paid? If so, how much? What's the equity amount and all that?
Right.
What do you feel like is the answer to those kind of questions? What are you telling people, and what are you seeking, I guess, if somebody approaches you, like what's the standard offer?
Yeah, and you and I've talked about this offline a couple of times, so I'm curious to hear if I've taken your advice and done something different, or if it's still what you're doing, or vice versa. And it's actually a post I want to write, so I'm actually glad we're using some AI to transcribe this, and then I'll probably have the AI fix it. So back to AI. What I finally realized is that, and I think the world realizes it too, is that what people ask when they come to us for advisory gigs and that kind of stuff is really, they want access to our network, right? It used to start out as, hey, be a part of our referral network, we'll pay you some money. And that's cool. Like if you help close a deal or get an introduction. And I was never great at it. I never embraced it all these years that I probably should have, but that's okay. And then over time, now that we build brands, and I'm not the only one. You don't have to be a consultant or an advisor. You could be a rep. You have a great brand and a great voice. There's tons of people out there. What people are really saying is, I want access to your network. And so for me, that's a gate. You don't get onto my property without paying the toll, right?
Well, what's the toll though?
Right. So I wanted to position it that way. And that's what influencer means, right? And it's not something I describe myself as, it's what other people do, but this is what the Kardashians have been doing for years. So for me,
right now it's all in negotiation, I think. There's no
standard.
There's no standard. It's not like, hey, if you are an advisor, you get a 0.25% equity or whatever.
Right. So I think the standard is somewhere between, 0.25% and 1%, depending on what you can get. I tend to come in around that 0.5% of equity. I also make sure that when they put that in a contract, that it says the exact number of shares and it confirms that it actually is 0.5%. Not that I'm ever going to go sue somebody, but I don't always know how many outstanding shares there are, right? So I have to trust there, and I make them put the strike price in and all that stuff. So
are you looking for a 4-year vest or a 2-year vest?
Yeah, so I'll kind of bullet point it, and then you can sort of pick it apart a little bit. So one is, I don't do options for advisory because the ideas that they're asking me for are immediate, and that's worth something. If you went and paid an actual, a McKinsey consultant, they ain't taking shares. They might take some with some, but they still got to pay for it. So that's one thing, is that it's never a requirement. I mean, it's never like, one, it's not options. I'm not paying for these options either. And two, I'm not going to earn them over 4 years. It's going to be over 2. And I've started to ask for a percentage, about 25% right up front. They're given to me right away. Like, I'm not going to stop.
So you're asking for equity, not options. Yeah. You're saying you don't want to have to pay to exercise them.
No, why would I?
I'm just asking the question. I want people to know, how you think about it and how you're operating.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think it could be a definition of like, well, making sure people understand equity means it's fully vested. Options means you have the option to buy them, which is very different. They also carry different tax implications. Ask an accountant, but that's the difference we're talking about. So I ask for equity. I asked for 25% up front. I asked for the rest to be vested over the next 2 years, 1/24 every month for the next 24 months. I also, now in the other way I do this is I tell someone you can do equity. Some companies can't get equity, like the board won't let it happen, or they haven't set it aside for advisors, so it's harder. Well, then they can pay me cash. And some companies have done a little bit of equity and a little bit of cash. Now, here's what they can get in return, because it's not, one, they get access to me to talk, whatever we decide to talk about product or go to market strategy, or even sometimes how do I get this deal closed, right? Because we're trying to get those or referrals. But for me, because I built a brand, sure, I'll write something on LinkedIn about it. Sure, I'll put, we can do a thought leadership piece in my newsletter. Sure, we could write a blog that goes on their blog or one that goes on my blog. So it's not just total advisory, getting advice. There's a play so that when I position this as, hey, you're actually asking me for my network. And if you really, I don't think they know how to ask that it's bigger than that. And I also think because of, Scott's got a community, which is different than Richard's newsletter. So Scott could leverage his GTM community. So there's different ways. So I position it back to them as that it's about access to the network, not about introductions to deals.
So this is an interesting point. So if it's about access to the network, aren't you then in a way becoming a free agent who is acting as a part-time salesperson for XYZ number of different companies?
Partially. I'm probably more of a part-time SDR than anything, right?
Sure.
Or marketing. Or
I was using those words interchangeably because I forget that most AEs don't actually sell anymore.
Right. So I would also go so far as to say that I'm part of demand marketing, right? Like if you think about the ability to use the newsletter and the LinkedIn post, that really kind of falls on demand gen. And then, yes, sure, I'll introduce you to people that we think is the right person. I'll also introduce people. This is the other thing I tell them. Oh, I'm an advisor for this company and this company. Why don't the two of you talk? Let's see if everybody wants to talk, because I think you should share ideas. I think you should see if there's some integration, right? In fact, I told one person last week, and then I'll shut up. I told one person, because they'd never done advisors before. And I said, oh, all right, well, why don't you call my buddy over at this company? I'm an advisor there. He's the kind of guy, if you said, hey, I'm trying to find advisors, what should I look for? And or is Richard worth being an advisor? So, so I will facilitate all kinds of conversation, which is way beyond this, hey, introduce us to people for 10% of a pinky promise that maybe they might buy sometime.
Yeah. So do you think that this is part of the future of sales, if not all of it? Said differently, like, is it actually worth people's time to email and cold call and try to sell that way versus, let's say I'm a brand new startup. I've got a couple engineers. I've got myself, maybe one other, business person, small team, nimble, agile. And they say, you know what? I don't want to have a sales team. We're not going to prospect like that. I'm going to get, a half dozen to dozen versions of Richard, get access to their network, try to get warm intros that way. And I'm going to try to close those deals myself. And we don't need to do this whole old school outbound push anymore.
I think it's multi-threaded, right? I don't think it's one or the other. In the scenario you described, I get super skeptical when an early stage startup comes and says, help us find our first customers. Because I'm like, no, that's too much pressure on me. Now I'm your salesperson. You need to go have those conversations. You need to figure that part out. That's part of being a founder and founder-led sales. If the technology is fucking mind-blowing, I might consider it. But I don't start there. Like, that's the whole thing. I don't start with the introduction. I start with, hey, you're gonna, because here's the first thing. Okay, you want introductions, and then they send me their marketing message. I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. I'm not sending this to somebody. So now the first thing I'm actually doing is helping them fix messaging.
Have you ever gotten a proposed message that you're supposed to send to somebody else that was good that you just used?
No, rarely, rarely.
I can think of a couple that I've barely had to modify.
That's kind of how I feel. There's a couple.
But most of them, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I should send that the way you wrote it.
Right.
I can do my own thing.
But this is but then all of a sudden now I'm working, right? Which is kind of like, make sure you're giving me advisor shares, but not a referral fee. Fuck that.
Yeah.
But what I tell people when they say, hey, will you send this over? I'll say, well, before you do it, whatever you send, I push them. I say, you have 45 words in 2 sentences to describe the pain you solve, not what you do. That's what I will send. And tell me the pain you solve, not what you do, because nobody cares what we do, right? Nobody cares that Scott's a go-to market strategist and leader. They care that he refines your message so you can find your earliest customers 10 times faster. That's what a founder wants to hear. They don't care that I'm a sales trainer. They care that I teach reps how to earn the right to ask questions, which questions to ask and when. And from that, I get something that's closer to what I would be comfortable sending, and then I still have to tweak it. So that's how I see it. So, but yeah, I think that's my. I mean, how do you see it? Like, what is? Let me flip it on you. Well, first of all, let's flip it back to you. How do you see the advisor referral thing going? Did I nail it? Did I miss something? Is it like, oh, I never thought about it that way, or is it that's exactly what I do?
You do it. You do it a little bit differently than I do. I actually think that you are a little bit more bold and upfront and assertive in terms of your ask. I've never, for example, tried to make a point to say I don't want options. I want actually equity because I don't want to have to exercise anything. So that's one example there. I think that I'm a little more bullish on that the only way you're going to really be able to punch through and get a hold of somebody to earn the right to talk to them is through your network and an intro from somebody. I do not answer my phone. I barely answer my phone when my family or friends call.
True. I can say that. I can confirm that this is true.
Yeah.
And as Scott's punishment, I just leave really long voicemails. I don't know if you even read them, or listen.
No, I don't. I don't listen to them or read them, unless I think that there's something urgent and I'm nervous for something. But so I don't answer my phone.
Next you from now, I'm going to say, oh, you got to listen to this voicemail. It's really important.
No, that I don't know what makes me do it. And I almost never do. But my point is, I don't use the phone, and I think I'm not alone in that. And I think that people don't want to pick up the phone. I think you're on edge already. You're thinking somebody's spamming you about something, right? Refi your house or lower your home insurance or whatever. And I think people's inbox is it's like a junkyard, hundreds of messages, thousands of messages go there to die and get lost. I don't care how good your subject line is or how well written your AI email is. I'm not reading it or responding to it probably if I don't know who the sender is. So I think I'm a little more bullish on this network and partnering your way in, possibly starting to do away with the old school outbound way of calling. We're halfway through. So, Richard, that's your cue.
Let's segue,
abrupt segue into commercial.
Yes. So thank you, everybody. We're trying to get creative on these commercials. By the way, if someone would ever like to just come on and record the commercial in a voiceover, maybe that'll be kind of fun to do too. So we'll have you sit here and listen to us for 30 minutes, and then you can come in and do the thing. Because no, we don't want long, big voiceovers.
Yeah, or send us some ideas on how we could spice up the commercial. Like Richard say it in a British accent.
Yeah, that could be fun. So, all right. So what we do, again, big shout out and so much appreciation for HubSpot and HubSpot Podcasting Network. Again, check out our friend Jason Bay. But if you didn't know, and as much as Scott and I get a little snarky about AI and things powered by ChatGPT, HubSpot has incorporated it, and it's cool and it works and I like it. And that is the one thing, like we were saying earlier, Scott, is that yes, I want to see how HubSpot does this. I need to see what that's like for a rep. I want to understand it because it matters and it's going to affect everybody. So please be sure to look at that. And it can do things like come up with blog ideas and posts on LinkedIn. It can draft the outlines. It can write a bunch of copy, and yes, it can do subject lines and all that kind of stuff. So it's in alpha. So I know it's a public alpha, which I still don't know the difference between alpha and beta. But HubSpot AI ChatSpot, HubSpot AI ChatSpot is their product. It can help you. This is one of the things I do like about it. So my prospect does respond in an email, or I'm in a communication. It can help me craft my messages continuously, not just the outbound stuff, right? And it can add all kinds of different notes and stuff into your CRM. So I really, really like it and appreciate it. And so please be sure to check it out and get early access to HubSpot AI today. HubSpot.com/artificial-intelligence. HubSpot.com/artificial-intelligence. And you can learn more about it over at HubSpot.com. And you can check out our show notes. You can click on there too. We appreciate it. And thank you to HubSpot. So, Scott, what else you got for us?
Yeah, I think you should tell people about the side hustle that you and Kathy have. I think you should talk to us about commercial real estate, RV properties, this kind of thing. Just tell people what the heck it is.
Yeah.
And is it worth like exploring? Who would be a good fit for it? Who wouldn't be a good fit for it?
Yes. Boy, that's an even sharper segue. Well done, Scott. That's fucking cool. By the way, I think Scott's winning, which means I'm losing, but I think I'm actually winning on the number of times I've used curse words.
Well, the secret here is that I'm just asking questions, so you have to talk more.
Yeah.
So I've found a way to rig the game potentially.
That's true. Yeah. You did a Kobayashi Maru. Well done.
I don't know what the fuck that means. I'm gonna have to Google that.
You don't know the Kobayashi Maru from Star Trek?
No, I didn't watch Star Trek.
Oh my God, it's how
my brother watched Star Trek. That was not a Scott thing. Back to the question, Richard. Focus on the question.
Yes. So here's the story. So that begins it all. Way back in the day, Kathy's dad has always done commercial real estate. He had his own office furniture company, but he always invested in real estate. Like that was his thing. And he grew ridiculous. I mean, he's done very, very well. And it was both commercial and residential. And by commercial, it was like you buy 8% of a huge strip center, or 2% of some,
by strip center, you mean a strip mall, right?
Strip mall, yeah.
You don't mean a strip club?
No, I do not. No, that's
just wanted to clarify and bail you out there.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Scott. So, and then Kathy got her first car, as I understand the story. And in that car, she actually ended up having an accident and totaled it. And Scott, I don't think you know the story. And she hit a Rolls Royce.
Oh boy. I did not know that.
No. And, Jeff, my father-in-law, had two responses. One is, "Are you okay?" And two, he said, "Well, at least you got great taste." So what that really means, though, is that I think at that point, Kathy got some insurance money, and he helped her invest it into a real estate property. So that's where she got exposed to this type of stuff. So it's a fun story. So that's the second. Over the years, Kathy has constantly invested and reinvested in commercial and residential real estate. long before she met me. We've been investing in stuff together since we've been married. You know, these gotta be 16 years, right? Because Riley turns 15. So, by the way, Scott, Kathy never remembers. Next time you talk to her, how long have you been married? She'll never remember. Usually it's a guy thing. But anyway, so we've done all these things, and it's really cool because the way it can work is you invest in something, you know, and you each month you get a little bit of a check back. You know, it might be $300 or $400, right? It's not a ton.
Yeah, mailbox money.
Right. And sometimes it is bigger. Believe me, there's somewhere they're like, holy shit, cool. But what happens over time is that your equity in that property grows, like because it creates value. Every few years, you have to refinance that loan because it's not like a 30-year traditional mortgage. And when you refinance, sometimes you get your money back. So let's say you threw in $100,000 and 4 or 5 or 6 years later, you know, and you've been getting a little bit, let's say you get $500 a month for all those years. Well, there's cash flow. That's cool. Then all of a sudden you have to refinance, and depending on how the stuff is done, sometimes you actually get your $100,000 back. And as I recall, sometimes you don't even pay taxes on it. So all of a sudden you have this cash thing, and then you still own the same amount of the property. So when it sells, you still get a piece of the pie. So this stuff happens. Like this is, and this to me is the beginning of that kind of an investment, which is not something I did. I've always been the stock guy. Everything I've ever done has been in stock. So it's nice that Kathy and I can diversify. There are times where if the market goes sour, there could be a cash call where it's like you actually have to put more money in.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we need to caveat this with a big fat legal disclaimer that we are not financial advisors, real estate work for a stockbroker. We do not have any advisors asking us to.
It's just interesting though, because this is non-tech traditional side hustle kind of stuff.
So, anyway, so you try and do that in different places. Now, here's what happens. Eventually, sometimes you actually have to sell the property. Well, then you have kind of two options. You either A, can take money and pay a ridiculous amount of taxes, or you have to take the whole amount and roll it into the next property. And the moment it sells, you have like 90 days or 60 days to identify the next property you're going to invest in, and then you got to close it. Otherwise, you do have to take the cash, and it has all these tax implications. So, and again, look, if you've done well, it's like you're not losing money, but nobody wants to pay the tax. So this is a thing to do. There are funds out there, you know, oftentimes like even in your 401k, in some of those places you can choose the kind of real estate funds. There are funds that do exist where you can contribute and you're not.
What type of person and personality would be good? Like, would I be good in this, or would I be terrible because XYZ? Like, what type of personality profile?
Only because I know this about you, and you've dabbled in it, you know, with an additional home that you then rented out. You understand the game. I don't think and if I approached you to say, hey, would you do this, you'd consider it. I don't think if it was the first time you were doing something, Scott Leese would do it. It'd be too scary.
Yeah, I agree with that. So somebody needs to be
willing,
not risk adverse.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
That being said, you know, my father-in-law is a little more, and Kathy's more risk averse about the stock market, because that's just, you know, it's too up and down.
And maybe you're risk adverse about things you just don't understand as much.
Yeah. So, anyway, so I think it's a great play. You know, believe me, there's a story I know of someone who, literally, I'm not kidding, they were part of one of these real estate deals, and they had an office building across from the state capitol in Sacramento. Like what's wrong? And then the financial crisis hit, and that loan came due, and the bank wouldn't refinance it, so they lost it. They lost the money in it. Like, that shit happens. That's why we're saying this is not scary. Yeah,
super scary.
And you know, this is from someone I know and trust, and you know him, Scott, and has a lot of experience with this stuff. And who would ever think that an office building next to a state capitol, where that's going to go blow up. We're not talking about, hey, let's take a risk and put something in an inner city.
Well,
so
crumbling businesses cause crumbling real estate markets.
Yeah,
There's a lot of I've heard this phrase. I don't know who the author is, or I would cite them, but have you heard this phrase about zombie companies?
No.
The concept is essentially that right now there's a bunch of companies, startups, that are funded, but don't really have product market fit, are not really selling and closing deals, and they're just sort of like wandering around like the Walking Dead.
Yes.
And they're going to be running out of money soon. So my question is there a great white knight consolidator? Is somebody going to come in and scoop up some of these companies? And if so, who would it be? What's your prediction?
So I think there are two parts of that. One, the great company that would come in and scoop is still waiting for some of those companies to fail so they can, by process of self-selection through Darwinism, the best ones are left.
Yeah.
And then they scoop them up, right? Again, in the world you and I live in, we see big tech companies swallow other tech companies, right?
Who has the appetite for that kind of thing right now? Is there anybody who would you have to, if we were playing roulette and you had to put chips on one number, whose number are you putting on? Who's lurking around out there, waiting, buying their time?
I'm going to split my chips, because we're playing roulette. I'm going to split the chip on two squares.
So you're going to put on 2 squares or 4?
Two, because I'm going to put them on the green 0 and 00. I don't think there's anybody out there right now who has the appetite.
Okay. All right.
That's my.
Two more rapid fire questions for you, and then we'll get on out of here. Thanks for being the guinea pig for this episode, sure. Richard.
I like that.
What's it like to be in the fucking hot seat?
First of all, it's easy.
Right?
Yeah. And,
interesting.
Particularly for Scott. Like if Scott said, Richard, come ask me questions, I'd be like, I got to do some homework. Although I probably wouldn't. But
well, I purposely didn't tell you that we were going to do this, let alone tell you the questions. So it'd be
that's how we do our podcast anyway. So
yeah, I know exactly. All right. Give me your ideal wish list surf and sales guest.
Ooh. I'd love to have. I'm going to give you some titles, right? And then there are people that we would know, right? Like I would love to have, particularly at the hot startups, right, that are really in the growth space. I'd love to have some VPs or executive VPs or even the founder show up, right? Like I think those would be fun. I think only because I like these people, want to hang out with them anyway. John Barrows would be cool. I think that Cynthia Barnes would be awesome. She's so fun and funny. I think that Larry Long Jr., who you just got to do with golf and sales.
There we go. Now we're getting some names. Now we can try to put our network to work.
Yeah.
And say, listen, y'all should message some of these people.
Yes.
Tell me you heard Richard saying that they were the dream attendee for Surf and Sales.
Yeah.
Y'all should check it out.
Yeah.
Last question. Appropriate.
I'd love to have Max Alt-Schuler there. I think it'd be fun. And part of it is too, like we've had Kevin Dorsey be there. We've had Scott Barker. People, I think in our community, people who know the podcast and the event, be like, oh, those would be people I'd want to hang out with, right?
Yeah.
So I think those are the people. How about you? Who's on your dream list? Who's on
this is not my show, Richard.
Yes, it is. It's part of your show. So
this is your time. I'm not prepared to give an answer.
Well, that is untrue, right? You know who you're gonna pick? You're gonna pick Jim Kelly because his jersey's hanging up behind you.
No. I'm thinking of James Perry, since he's a big surfer and he's like flying around all over the world doing these videos and stuff like that.
Yep, that would be cool.
Or big cool video creators like Will Aiken or Nick Capozzi, people like that would be great. Yep. My last question, appropriately, how will you know when it's time to quit and walk away from it all?
As soon as my wife stops remodeling the house.
Yes.
So back to this real estate thing, we actually had a good deal come through. My wife's like, let's remodel the part of the house. And I'm like, well, when can I retire? And she's like, not anytime soon. So that's the first step.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Richard's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Here's the financial answer. And for some reason in my head, if I had 4 million cash in the bank that I can invest, that'd probably be the number, 4 to 5 million. So, and I don't know why. It's just a nice round number. Probably should be 7 with the rate of inflation. But
Yeah.
and that being said, I am on a path. Again, not a plug, by the way. All these ideas we're giving you, please don't go invest in real estate or stocks, because Richard and Scott said something. We're not experts, and believe me, I've lost a lot too. We've actually gotten into a real financial advisor, like well beyond like a stock market, stockbroker kind of thing. Like we're talking to somebody. So I think that's the first step to anyone, is to go find someone who does that and say, what's the first step I should be taking so that you'd want me to be your client? How much does it take for me to come and you want me to be your client, Mr. or Mrs. Financial Advisor? So if you're looking for that, I would tell you to go do that homework first. And that's going to help you set your own goals.
All right. Good stuff, Richard. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Surf and Sales Podcast. We'll be back next week.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to HubSpot. We appreciate it.